Hey guys, welcome to the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast. And if years ago you'd have told me that I would be speaking to someone who I've admired for years, I would have told you you're crazy. But here he is right now. Percy Crawford joins the Zapata Brand Boxing Podcast. Percy, how are you?
George, my man, you know how to give an intro, brother. I'm doing good, man. I'm doing great. Thanks, bro.
Well, I've been following you for a minute, man, and I never thought I'd get the opportunity to actually sit down and actually speak with you. You know, being on the level that you are and the level that I'm at, I am way down here. So
Not
finally,
really,
I get a
bro.
chance to do it. I finally get a chance to do it. But first, before we start, I want into the news of boxing. I want to give the people a little bit of background of who you are and how did you first get and how you got first started into boxing. And you were one of the pioneers in this whole genre.
Yeah, man. 21 years this year in May. So it's been a long time. The story is kind of uneventful, but so I go back to the what we used to call the chat room days, and I was on this chat on the website, and this guy, they would actually bring fighters into this chat. So they
Mhm.
would let the fans that were in the chat ask questions to the fighters, and I was just kind of always ready. You know, sometimes they would say, just say, for instance, they said, "George, you're up, ask a question," and then they have to come back to you and say, "George, you're up, ask a question." Well, I was always ready. I always had my question ready. So they would say, "Okay, skip George, go to Percy," and I just was always ready. So eventually, the guy asked me, "Man, you ever thought about covering boxing?" And I'm like, "Nah, I'm just a fan. You know, enjoy being in the chat room." He said, "Well, if there's ever a fight come out your way and you want to cover it, let us know." Lo and behold, New Orleans isn't a place that get a whole lot of fights. They had a fight in New Orleans. I asked him if he could put in a credential, and the rest is history, man. I've been in it since.
Wow, that is so it basically is opportunity. That's it. And you were ready.
Absolutely. That's why when you say you're way down here, you're never way down there, man, because I was literally in a chat room as a fan of the sport, chatting with guys. I believe it was Evander Holyfield that night, if I'm not mistaken. And, you know, I got a gig off of it and made a 20 plus year career out of it.
So really you really didn't go to school for it. It was something you weren't looking to do, and then boom, here you are.
Yeah, no journalism school. That's why I always say I'm an interviewer, not a journalist, because I don't want to disrespect any journalists that put in
Right.
their, 4 years of journalism school. Never went to journalism school. Hell, I'm a college dropout. I didn't even finish college. So, look, man, you can do whatever you want to do. You just got to have the right mindset, brother.
And so when you did this was something that you did you ever think you would be doing this full time and saying this is my career?
Nah, man. Honestly, I thought kind of like the intro I told you. You know, I thought if they have a fight come locally in New Orleans, Biloxi, Mississippi, I'll go cover it. And that led to me one day being in Vegas, being in Dallas, Texas, being in Ohio. I've traveled all over covering boxing. I never thought I would make a career out of it. I thought it was something I would do as a hobby, something I would do kind of for fun as a fan. And then you learn the etiquette of covering events. You know, you can't be in press row with an alcoholic beverage. You can't be in press row cheering. I mean, it's a little bit different now, but when I came in, it was different. So once I learned the etiquette, learned how to maneuver backstage and in the press rooms and things like that, it became second nature, and I made a career of it, and I haven't looked back, man.
So when you first got into it, and I read about you having your first real MMA interview with a Rampage Jackson, which is, that's a high level right there to do that. But when you first got into it, when did you not become quote unquote fanboy? Because, when I first got to meet certain fighters, I was like, oh boy, your first impression is like, now I've been around boxing for a while, but the big guys, you're on the big guy type of level there. Those big guys can be intimidating when your first go around. How was it before? What was the switch where you're like, I'm one of you guys now?
Man, I don't know if I ever had to switch, because I think at heart, guys like you and I will always be fans.
Mhm.
There's just, you have to kind of compartmentalize when to be a fan, and when I'm at home watching, I'm a fan. When I'm covering an event and I'm around these guys, obviously there's somewhat of a professionalism hat that goes on. My first interview that was posted in MMA was Rampage Jackson, and just so happened I met him a few weeks later. He was a cool guy. Most of these fighters are just like us. That's I guess, the comfort zone for me. Is I never met a fighter that was kind of standoffish or made me feel like, the little media guy. So I
Mhm.
never had that kind of introduction into it. I had the introduction of, you know, the late great Nazim Richardson, Bernard Hopkins' old trainer, within minutes of meeting me, having his arm around me, telling me stories. You know,
Yeah, no, he was a great guy. He was a great guy.
Nazim was
I
a
knew him,
super great guy. He was
knew him from
actually
the
my very
amateurs.
first contact that I had on my phone of a boxing person. So
Yeah, I knew him from the amateurs with his two kids, Rock and Tiger. They're
Tiger,
Allen, both very good fighters. I knew him for years. I'd seen him coming up through the amateur system. So yeah, very. They're likable people. You would be. It's weird that they're that. Our sport being we're likable.
boxing is a very blue collar sport. So it's rare to meet someone that seems like they're up here. You know, most guys are down to earth, very personable. And I've never, I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a lot more difficult back then. And I say back then like I'm ancient, but 20 years ago to secure interviews than it is now. Social media kind of opened the lane for you to be able to reach people easier. But back then it was difficult, no lie about it. But once you got them, as long as they can relate to you, man, they're blue collar guys, man. They're fighters.
And to that point, I'm going to ask you one more question before we move forward. Does that bother you at all that you put the grind in? Because believe me, I used to watch your stuff, read your stuff all the time as I was going through, and I'm like, man, the guy he has all this great content, all this, the writing, everything else is there. Does it bother you that some guy like me and I could just come in there and do it? Now I've been following for a long time. I've been involved in it. I fought, but could come in there and this is. I consider it a hobby so much. It's not my main job because I don't make money off of this. But talking to people like this and putting you guys out there, I feel I do some help people at some point. Does it bother you if people come in there and make a joke out of it sometimes?
Um, I wouldn't say bothers me. Obviously, evolution is apparent. It's gonna happen. So I understand things hopefully gets easier, and it has through social media, through fighters, managers, and publicists being on the internet. You can just get at them. There was a time I couldn't tell you who so and so's publicist was or who so and so's manager was because it just wasn't ready information for us like that. So I wouldn't say it bothers me. It bothers me to a degree when you're covering an event and there's this kid, who's sitting side by side with me. Somehow we got the same credential position, and he's a year in the game, or 2 years in the game, or sometimes 6 months in the game. I think there
Mhm.
needs to be a better vetting system to that. And I think, you've probably seen it, George, where guys sneak in press conferences and they're jokingly interviewing Leonard Ellerby or somebody. That would have
Yeah.
never happened when I first
No.
got in the game,
No.
man. We were getting denied credentials left and right at one point. So you actually had to have proof in the pudding back then, to where now, I guess, if I was going to use the word irritated or aggravated a little bit, it is a little easier for guys who don't know what they're doing to get into the door. But in terms of what man, don't short yourself, man. What you're doing is giving guys a voice, and that's never easy. This interviewing thing ain't as easy as people think.
No, it's not. At first it was see, I got into it. My brother actually is good friends with Greg Valentino. He was our first guest. So that was a little more comfortable. It was comfortable. Then I had a couple NFL players on, comfortable because I know them. So then as I started going, and then I reached out, Teddy Atlas and other people have a good friendship with. So then it became easier. And I feel it's better when you know them. And if you're there in person, it makes things a lot easier. And as I grow, yeah, I'd like to be able to say, hey, you're pretty good at doing what you do. So as we transition a little bit fast forward, would you say your relationship with Floyd Mayweather was where you really started to really excel? Because you were the guy with Floyd Mayweather.
Actually, for me, Floyd Mayweather Sr., man, I did so many interviews with Floyd Mayweather Sr., and it was right on the cusp of them talking about the Pacquiao fight. I interviewed him a little bit before then.
Mhm.
Actually, I want to say it was Roy Jones Jr. fighting Anthony Hanshaw, and Floyd Sr. was Anthony Hanshaw's trainer. So I did
Mhm.
an interview with him leading up to the fight, and I went out to Biloxi to the fight, and somehow he ended up giving me like some buffet vouchers or something, and we just became super cool. He invited me to his room, and man, it's I love those kind of like organic stories because
Mhm.
it seems surreal at times, but it's so genuine. Like it was so genuine to him. Like get on the elevator and come up to my room, and yeah, man, I ain't gonna use all these vouchers, and then we just became cool. fast forward a little bit, the Mayweather Pacquiao talk got up, and I don't know how familiar you are with Floyd Mayweather Sr., but he's amazing at giving you some good one-liners. So he gave me some one-liners. Our interview ended up being on a TV station in the Philippines. A few people sent me that. This was years ago. And that was kind of my introduction to the Mayweathers, Floyd Jr., Jeff Mayweather, Roger Mayweather. I think I've interviewed the entire clan at some point.
Yeah, Floyd Sr. was always a guy that I always thought he was super cool. We went out to meet him in Vegas because my son was going to train there for a little bit, not just because it was like an hour or something. They were giving like an hour thing where you could train for an hour or something. We went to his gym there, but he was sick and he couldn't go. So this is when he started getting the thing with the yes, and he would come and go. So we just happened to get there a week that we couldn't be there. So that, which was fine. We stayed there, we trained a little bit, it was all fun, it was fine. And even the other guy wasn't there. I forget his name. Escapes my mind. The Black Panther, what's his name? He trains Francis Ngannou right now. Guy with the dreads.
Dewey Cooper.
Yeah, he was supposed to be there. He couldn't be there. So either way, we still got to train there. It was a great time to be there. So as we're going forward now, you're now, right now with Zenger News. How'd that come into play?
So it's weird. It all circles back to boxing. So I'm at work one day because I have a regular job. I guess I'll call it a regular job. I think covering sports and interviewing people is a regular job too, but I do have a regular job. I was at work one day. An amazing guy, Andre Johnson, calls me out of the blue. I've dealt with Andre Johnson probably a couple of years when I got into boxing. He was Tony Thompson, the heavyweights manager.
Yep.
And I'm sorry, publicist. And he was also the publicist for the Peterson brothers, Lamont and Anthony.
Oh, wow.
So he called me and he said, hey, Percy, I might have an opportunity for you. I see you, because I kind of ventured outside of boxing and was kind of getting a little mundane to just interview fighters. So I dabbled in a little bit of entertainment, music, I was interviewing everybody. So he just so happened was like, man, I have this site, ZENGER News, and what you do now is perfect for us. We have, a bunch of tabs on the site where it's entertainment, it's sports. And I didn't want to throw it with boxing. I've been with them for 2 or 3 years now, so it's been amazing.
Okay.
Sorry, I was getting a call and I had to cancel.
Yeah, no, cut out a little bit, but I got to so when you got that call, you were already. I know it could be mundane because if you look at most things, you feel like it's monotonous asking the same question to the same fighters. How was training camp? How'd you do it? It gets mundane. So how was it switching to different avenues, whether it be entertainment or whatnot? And how do you, it is in my position, how would you get away from asking the same question all the time that's being asked?
We have to continue to be creative. I just interviewed Keith Thurman the other day, and I open with, I know I'm about to ask you a bunch of questions you're tired of answering, so I'll try to ask them in the most creative way I can. And that's what I did. People talk about his layoff, and instead of just saying, you're on a 2-year layoff, how do you plan on dealing with Tim Tszyu? I asked him, was the layoff more physically or mentally tougher to come back from? And we had a very good conversation. I thought Keith gave me a great interview. That should be up in the next couple of days. But I think, man, for me, I thought I messed up at first because I went into it like I've interviewed 1,000 fighters. I'm going to go into entertainment. It's going to be the same thing. And I'm firing off emails and I'm trying to get people. And for like a solid 2 weeks, I didn't hit anything back. So I was like, oof, I'm about to have to go back into this fighting lane, MMA, kickboxing, boxing. And then my phone just started blowing up with people, returning my email requests. So again, man, patience, I guess, is virtue. I was patient with it. And it really wasn't difficult because I was over everything you just said. Hey, man, how's training camp? How's preparation? I was kind of over that. So when you interview guys outside of your wheelhouse, it makes you creative. So just like in boxing, we have to keep being creative and kind of reinventing the wheel. When you interview people outside of the fight game, it automatically makes you creative. So it was cool to talk about, music and movies and everything. I was interviewing unsung heroes and people that beat cancer. So it was cool for me. It was a good switch up.
Do you think that would work for a regular channel, or do you think you'd have to do something like ZENGER News where you're kind of broad?
I think if you have a title that matches, and that's why I never want to kind of get pigeonholed in another like the fight this or the fight that, because it's a little weird when you interview. Even if you're interviewing a musician about a fight, it's kind of weird if the title of your programming has fight in it or something like that. So I always kind of want to stay away from pigeonholed kind of titles. And ZENGER news, it's news, it's entertainment, it's whatever, it's weather. You could talk about anything when the title is ZENGER news. So I do want to kind of stay away. Not saying I would never go back, but I do want to kind of stay away from things that are more, specific, like, so and so hip hop. Well, if you interview anybody that's not in hip hop, it's gonna be a little weird,
You have a country singer in hip hop.
Exactly.
That wouldn't go over well. No.
Probably wouldn't get a big audience for that one.
So let's switch gears if we can. Biggest news in the boxing industry the last couple days. Canelo Alvarez apparently parting ways with PBC. I don't know your relationship right now with PBC, if it's close or not. I'm pretty sure you're pretty close with Tim Smith there, the publicist there. What do you know about it? And from a business perspective, would you think this is a good move or a bad move for PBC? We all know Canelo's going to get paid, but PBC, let me ask you, good move or bad move?
In a sense of paying something you're not willing to pay, it's a good move, because obviously they couldn't come together on a number. If you have a guy that's not willing to fight the guys you want him to fight, there's no promotional fighter deal there, because apparently, obviously, the promoters present fighters, and if you say David Benavidez and he say no, it's hard to strike a deal that way. So in terms of PBC, I think PBC has a big enough roster to be okay. In terms of Canelo, outside of PBC, there's not a whole lot out there. Like you said, he's going to get paid either way. He hasn't set dates because there's always going to be Cinco de Mayo. There's always going to be Mexican Independence Day. I just don't know if the buzz is going to be there for a Mungia or definitely a Berlanga type guy. But I'm also one of the guys think we may be seeing Canelo's last year in boxing. So he kind of wants to go out on his own terms and his way.
Oh, I think that too. But I think I've been saying that for about 6 months to a year that he's on his way out. But either way, he's getting paid. I got a little blowback when I said that I thought it was a good move for PBC. And I equated to, I own a business. I equated to, if somebody wants to get $20 an hour, but I can only value $15 an hour, the guy's got to go. If you can get a better deal somewhere else, go. But then it goes back to the contractual agreements. Then it goes back to wouldn't he be better if you just let him go? Just go. Because do you want the whole ship to come down? Or do you let that cut your losses and go? Because there's no way he's making anywhere close in pay-per-view numbers with a Charlo, a Munguia, or a Berlanga, especially not Charlo. But Berlanga and Munguia, I don't think they can get that 1 million mark. I don't think they can.
No, and let me ask you, George, do you think it was more of a dollar amount, or do you think it's so hard for me to wrap my mind around Canelo's unwillingness to fight David Benavidez? Is it David Benavidez, or is it a dollar amount?
In my opinion, I think he's going to wait for Benavidez to move up, only because I think he doesn't want to go out in a tough fight. I don't think he's scared to fight him. I don't think any fighter is worried about fighting anybody ever. They're fighters. That's what they do. But I think for Canelo not being, he wanted his money. He said, "This is my money. This is what I'm contracted with." But then PBC on their end has to decide: is it worth the whole ship going down? Because there's a lot of money lost there. There was $900 million invested. I think they have money, but do you put $35 million? That's a lot of money, regardless of how big your company is. $35 million is $35 million bucks on one guy to hope he fights Benavidez, because that's the only fight I see he can make the return in. The other two guys, Munguia and Berlanga, I don't think he can make that money back. So if you're not guaranteeing me Benavidez, walk. I say you got to cut him loose. That's the only thing I could think of. So
no, I agree with that. And I think it goes back to if there's no deal, there's no deal. And I think if you offer names of money and the other side won't agree, like you say, you just have to let them walk. I think they have an amicable split. I don't think Canelo. And one thing I've learned about Canelo is he's a water under the bridge guy. He's that's water under the bridge. He's moved on. it wouldn't shock me if he finished his career with PBC. I mean, it's just the way he's moving leads me to believe he's kind of at the end and he wants to dictate the way he goes out.
And it's funny you say that, water under the bridge, because the fight that is rumored to happen will be against Munguia. And I know Canelo does not like De La Hoya to deal with him at all. But he'll deal with him if you're going to give me $35 million.
He's that guy. He's that guy. And it literally leads me to believe. And like you said, you've been saying it. I think I've said it a few times. I wouldn't be shocked now if 2024 is Canelo's last year, especially if he gets 3 fights in like he says he wants.
The only what I've always said since I saw the 3-fight deal with PBC, I thought the 3 was going to be his last. But I've always thought he would fight at the Sphere in Vegas one time, and I thought it was going to be Benavidez' last fight. Now I think no. I think it'll probably be like Berlanga or Munguia, the last fight. So I still think Charlo's still in the mix. I still do. I think for May, I know he's a little bit wacky right now, but I think he's still in the mix for that May 5th, because I think it's got to be an easy fight, unless, and we'll get to our next point here, unless the fight on April 20th gets moved to May 5th in Las Vegas, which was Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney. How do you see this fight, and how do we get? I don't know if you saw the press conference the other day.
Yes.
Were you there or no?
No, I didn't go. I didn't attend.
That was one of the weirdest press conferences I've ever seen. Now it was entertaining, but there's a lot of moving parts over there.
It is 2 compelling guys. I wouldn't say Devin Haney is as compelling, but Bill Haney is compelling enough for the both of them. Ryan Garcia is a very compelling guy. Seems to be getting a little more comfortable in being what he wants to be for these fight promotions. I don't know if Ryan Garcia's maturity can match Devin Haney's consistency. Devin Haney has consistently shown that he wants to fight the best. Devin Haney has consistently shown that he comes in shape, he becomes ready to fight. Still a little bit of maturation issues to me for Ryan, even if he got a lot of people talking about the fight with his antics last night. I don't, in my personal opinion, if I'm marketing a fight and people presumably feel like he quit against Tank, I'm not going to market the fight based on the fact that I drank, I smoke, I'm lazy, and then the next day you come out and say, look, I run 8 miles a morning. You know, most of the stuff I do is trolling. That's a maturation thing. There's other ways to promote the fight, because having us talk about the fight because of your antics is one thing. Having us interested in flying out or paying for the fight is another. So if I'm in Ryan Garcia's shoes, I'm letting people know, look, the Duarte fight was just the beginning. I left no stones unturned for this fight. I'm going to be so ready. But to say like, oh, I'm high, that's why I'm laughing so much, and yeah, I drink and smoke, I wouldn't market a fight like that in the situation he's in.
Ryan came in as a squeaky clean guy, and it did get just the last few years prior to COVID. I think COVID had a little bit to do with that. I think it had a lot to do with everything. But if I'm the promoter and I'm promoting a fight and I'm investing money in a Ryan Garcia, and he's going on social media and even at the press conference saying, I don't like fighting here, I want to go, this fight might not happen here, I'm mad, because you're not giving that customer the guarantee that this fight's going to happen, and I'm going to put my money down. I'm going to fly to New York, and I'm going to get a hotel, which is extremely expensive, and spend the day there. I'm mad. So either he's got, and you're right, maturity. You either got to grow up or don't get in this game. This game is a tough game. And if you look at Bill Haney and Devin Haney, I met Devin. Devin Haney is one of the nicest guys I've ever met. It was unbelievably great to my kid. He stayed there. He was getting a haircut. He stayed there and talked to my kid. My kid was there, obviously, just to go to Floyd's gym. Unbelievably nice kid, very mature, doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, does the right wing, and very quiet. Now, he's come a little bit out of his shell. I think he's at the stage where Floyd was, where Floyd fought Arturo Gatti, and he was pretty boy, and then he changed over to Money Mayweather. I think this fight, if he fights to the way I think he can, I think he takes Ryan out. I actually think he'll stop him. Or he quits, one or the other. If he does that, I think he will raise his level even higher, and will be that turning point that you saw with Money Mayweather.
No, absolutely. And you were going somewhere, and I'm gonna finish that point for you.
Go ahead.
when Ryan came in, he was this quiet, kind of squeaky clean kid. To me, it seems like when he pulled out, I believe it was the Javier Fortuna fight with the mental health
Yes.
things started to turn a little bit for him. And the loss to Tank didn't help. He's trying to reel it back in. It's almost like he's trying to figure out who he wants to be. Does he wants to be this tough guy? Does he wants to be this, guy that praises Christ? He's having somewhat of an identity crisis. And I think fighting Devin Haney is the wrong guy. This kid is so consistent with what he's done. So this is probably the wrong opponent to try to figure out who you are. And it comes out as angry. Like, I've never seen Ryan this in your face, I'm gonna knock you the F out. He kind of did a little bit of that with Tank, but he's like over the top with it. And I don't know what he's searching for. I don't know why he's so out of his body. But hey, Ryan has a great equalizer because he has one of the fastest, greatest left hooks I've seen in recent times. I don't know if the consistency to perform under control is there. I thought he had moments against Tank, and his maturity came out. He just went berserk for whatever reason in the second round. I don't know if he has the composure to deal with a Devin Haney, because Devin has shown us a lot of things in recent fights that Ryan hasn't shown me.
And it's funny you say that because you said he was very out of character. And that's the one thing I notice on fighters who are unsure of themselves. Yeah. Devin Haney is never out of character. He's not. Ryan Garcia, before he fought Tank, and I go back to Ronda Rousey when she fought Holly Holm, was out of character and yelling and carrying on and whatever. And I said, something's not right. It just doesn't seem right.
Wouldn't shake hands and all. Yeah.
Just weird. And Ryan was never like that. So to your point, something, the maturity process, or he has an identity issue, doesn't know whether he wants to fight or not fight, because I will give him credit for this. And whether this is just a money grab to get the two back, he fought Tank and Haney. If this Haney fight comes off, those are two guys people will steer away from a little bit. Now, if he goes out and fights Matias next, then I give him all the credit in the world. But I mean, he is willing to make the fight.
Ryan is a bumper, and that's one reason I give him a lot of props. He will bump anybody, and he's shown that. So he gets a lot of credit for that. I think Ryan has a lot of trust issues. If you remember for the Duarte fight, him and Bernard Hopkins, that's one of his promoters that he's, going back and forth with. The situation with, the leaked information supposedly before the Tank fight. So he got rid of Goosen, and him and Golden Boy, at one point he tweeted, F it, me and Oscar De La Hoya is the only fight that makes sense, or something along those lines. So it's like he's battling promoters, he's battling his trainers, he's battling, potentially having a mole in his camp. So I can understand a young kid like this having trust issues. I mean, I think Ryan's on his fourth trainer and he's in his 20s. To me, that's not a good sign when you have a kid on the other side who, no matter who the moving parts was in his corner or his camp, his father's always been there. So a lot of trust issues, a lot of maturity issues, every reason to lean towards Devin Haney for me.
One point that you made there that I wanted to ask you about. In these last, we've been in boxing for a long time. We didn't have to deal with this. But these videos that are coming out of sparring sessions, that is probably one thing I dislike the most out of all, because what happens in that gym should be very, very quiet. I mean, we know in the circles, oh wow, that guy got his break speed off by this guy. Yeah. And that's why these matches get made, because they say, hey, this trainer knows him. Hey, you want to take that fight? He ain't what he think he is. But they have this stuff come out and say, oh, I'm showing him and I'm putting it on there and then putting it on Instagram. That's just not good. It's not good. What do you think of stuff like that?
I was just telling someone today, I guess I'm too old school, because this era of recording everything, I mean, we have kids now that record actually committing crimes. So
I know,
there was a time where I know in the Mayweather gym, you had to turn your phone in. And I remember, I forgot who it was, but they snuck in with a phone. I guess they had two phones and they turned one in and they recorded a little bit of Floyd footage. That dude wasn't going to make it out of that gym until he turned that phone in and they deleted that footage. And they were going to make sure of it. Not saying what would happen to him, but I can tell you he wasn't going to get out of that gym. Now it's so prevalent. It's almost second nature. Like, people just like, oh, wait till I upload this footage, or, wait till this footage leak of our sparring session. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. I've seen guys in the gym, and I'm sure you have too, George. If you see them spar, you're like, who is this? This kid's a world champion. And it just doesn't translate. It doesn't translate to the lights and the bright stars. And, you know, they're almost average in the ring. And I can even say names, I won't, but I've seen guys that look amazing in the gym. And for whatever reason, it just doesn't translate to the ring. So are we really going to take that much out of a sparring session? And people fail to realize when they talk about like, oh, you got to see the Tank Haney. Haney was 19. He's 25 now. Like some fighters do mature. Some fighters do get better. So how much can you take from that? It was in such a clickbait, informational time where it's like the more I put up, the better. That people hang on to that. I've never really cared about sparring like that, and I almost think it's disgusting. Like you break almost a unwritten trust to share sparring footage.
That's funny you say that because I was sparring just the other day. The guy was like 65, and if someone would have had a video of that, it wasn't good on my. I got and I just it's my first time back in the ring there, and I trained this guy as a judge, and he trains with me and helps me sparring and stuff like that because I'm actually fighting in April, so I don't want to be in there with a 19-year-old. I'm 47. So I start slow to get used to getting hit again. And if someone would have taped that, it would have been bad. I would have been on World Star Hip Hop. I mean, it was bad.
They would have shut this down. They would have canceled you already.
Yeah, they would have. Percy, you don't want to talk to him. I mean, I would say this guy. Yeah, no, it wasn't good. It wasn't good. But it's hopefully in the next couple of years, where do you see boxing itself? I mean, everyone says boxing's on the decline. I go, where do you see boxing now? You can compare it to MMA. I think MMA is a different animal, only because you have one guy at the top who makes the decisions. It's almost like Vince McMahon. WWE, he does well, maybe not now, but I mean, he makes the choices. He decides what happens. Dana White. Can boxing ever? And this is the last point I'll make. I know you're a little stressed for time. Can boxing ever get to a point where we saw back in the 90s where Bob Arum and Don King would work together? A Don King card would have Tyson, Trinidad, Chavez. Arum card would have the opposite, but they could all work together. Do you ever see that coming back again? Or is it just the money out of control and just not enough of the pie to go around?
Boxing is in a scary place, man, because over the past, I don't know, I would say, I guess 8 to 10 years, we've lost HBO. Mm-hmm. We've lost Showtime. I remember there was a deal with NBC. At one point, BET had gotten the boxing. All of that is gone. So to your point, I think we need them to work together because the networks are drying up and this streaming thing is kind of the new wave. The only problem with the streaming thing is how many available dates will we have? This is just my opinion. So we have Keith Thurman, Tim Tszyu, March 30th. I think on March 30th, they'll announce Tank's next fight for the summer as the second installation of PBC on Amazon Prime. Well, if you're doing that and you're looking at it, that's 2 dates, and that's being halfway through the year. If Tank is coming back in June or July, that's 2 Amazon Prime dates, and we'll literally be halfway through the year. So I just don't know how many dates Amazon Prime is going to be willing to give. The Zone can't carry the load. ESPN Plus can't carry the load. So these guys are going to have to start working together some way, somehow, because boxing is in a weird place because there are so many moving parts. Like you said, you look at MMA, there's other MMA companies, but we know Dana White's kind of the puppet master. I mean, people don't do things in the other organizations with the hope of potentially fighting in the UFC. So they won't even say certain things about Dana White. Like, I want to be there one day. A little different in boxing. I mean, you have PBC, you have Top Rank, and then you have the outside entities like a Samson Lukowicz who has David Benavidez and guys like that. So very weird place for boxing. I hate the inactivity. So I would hope these guys can somehow start working together and making more cards. There's no reason we should not have seen Boots Ennis, Terrence Crawford since his great performance. Maybe it's by choice. I just feel like if there was more dates, more venues, more events that they can put on, we would see these guys a little more. I mean, Stephen Fulton lost to Inoue. We haven't seen him since. Keith Thurman's fighting for the first time in 2 years. Like, it should never be that way.
I think Dana White gets a lot of flack for his pay structure, but I will say this. He has a lot of activity. The fights do go on. I'm all for fighters getting paid. I'm all for getting paid. They should get as much money as they can. But I think there should be some sort of incentive plan saying if you will get 5 million, let's just say that's the number, if we sell X amount of pay-per-views. But that's your guaranteed money. I know they try to do that now. But get the fights together and say, anything over this, we'll get you a bigger percentage instead of saying pay-per-view buys of the pie. So it gives them the incentive to fight each other. Just fight each other for that reason. Say, we'll give you more of the pie instead of saying, oh, well, I can get more of the pie. And I get some people get pay-per-view points as what it is, but make it a little more incentive to say, hey, give up a little and we'll give up a little. I don't see that coming down anytime soon. PBC has a lot of red flags out there. There's that $900 million thing rolling around. I don't know what's going on with that, but there's just, that's not good. If that went out, that would be really scary then, because then that's 3 in 3 years. Not good.
Not good at all. And I'll be honest, man, even the way the zone's kind of moving, I mean, they're dependent on the Saudis to bail them out in many ways. And, their prices steadily climbed in a upward manner, the ascension of their prices, the quality, a lot of people have complained hasn't been what it once was. So we're looking at a lot of entities in boxing that's, I don't want to say on the last limbs, but they went through some money and probably didn't do best with it. I mean, so it's in a scary place. I keep saying that boxing is in a scary place. It will never die. So, people can, forget about that. Boxing will never die, but it can definitely be on the ropes. And I would say now more than ever, boxing is probably on the ropes. I never thought I would see HBO and Showtime completely done with boxing, and that's where we're at.
Mm-hmm. I think boxing is like Evander Holyfield in round 10 against Riddick Bowe. Wobbling around the ring, but it's still got, still fighting back.
Still swinging.
They're still standing. Percy Crawford, it has been an honor. I'll tell you, you don't know how much of an honor it is for me to talk to you. I've watched you for years, if not decades, to be honest with you, if not decades. That's how long I've been around reading your stuff and watching your stuff. And someday I just want to have the ability to come out there and meet you and say, hey, you were one of my mentors in doing something like this.
Hey, man, I appreciate that so much. That means a lot to me, man. Thanks for the support. George, good luck in April, man. And before I go, I have to wish my daughter, whose birthday, she turns 12 tomorrow. So happy birthday, Jaden Rose. And my coworker, he's battling pancreatic cancer. So Troy Strong, Troy Bodine, get better, man. He's in the fight of his life, and he's counterpunching, George. He's not giving up easy. So best of luck to Troy. Happy birthday to my daughter, and good luck to you in April, my man.
I appreciate it. Percy, where can they get a hold of you?
ZENGER News. Actually, we are actually a news wire. So there's other sites that pick up our things. Luckily for me right now, it's been Sports Illustrated, Fan Nation. So all of my boxing stuff is on ZENGER News, but you can also catch it on Sports Illustrated Fan Nation page.
Percy, once again, absolute pleasure to be with you. You're a great guy and someone who is a positive person in the world of sometimes not so positive stuff that happens in the world of boxing.
Thank you so much, George. I appreciate you having me on, brother.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for watching the Zapata Brand podcast. Please subscribe to the podcast and listen where all podcasts are available.